What happens to the rights of our peoples in the Pacific when their lands disappear? They no longer have a right to lands and resources. Their rights are permanently violated, and in the same process, the existence of their states as well extinguished. So in this issue in the Pacific, indigenous peoples are standing with the oasis states, the alliance of small island states. Let's look at the rest of the declaration. We have this right to conservation. We have a right to land, territories, and resources. Why do we have the right? Article 25 informs us that indigenous people have the right to maintain and strengthen their spiritual relationship with their lands, territories, waters, coastal seas. Our spirit, our spiritual relationships with the Creator. We have a right under Article 25 to uphold these sacred traditions and the sacred obligations for future generations. Let's not forget what Article 24 says, that our survival depends on our ability to access traditional medicines so that we can maintain our health, to preserve our vital medicinal plants, our animals, our minerals. If our territories and lands sink beneath the sea, there will not be any traditional medicines for our peoples. There will not be any wellspring for the spiritual survival of our peoples, nor will there be any sacred guidance for our children. It's quite clear to me, as a human rights expert and one of the first members of the Permanent Forum, that when we follow international law, when we use the balancing test, we simply cannot accept the second option that came out of the alleged Global Indigenous Summit in Alaska. We simply cannot put the right to development of indigenous communities before the existence of indigenous peoples and the survival of the earth. Now we come to a time when a line is drawn, and we will see which indigenous will stand for future generations and who will stand for the integrity of the earth, and those who will say that the only choice we have is to preserve the right to development. We shouldn't have allowed ourselves to be backed in to an either-or situation that pits indigenous against indigenous. But we find ourselves in this situation now. In closing, two more positions I wanted to mention. There has been now a case from the Inter-American system, and I thank my colleague for bringing it to my attention. The case is Saramacca people versus Suriname, in which the Inter-American courts come down solidly on the side of indigenous peoples who wish to preserve their lands, territories, and resources in the climate change crisis. You need to read this. This is international law. It's above domestic law. And finally, everyone needs to be aware that the Permanent Forum is now conducting an expert study. The expert study is on the extent to which climate change policies and projects adhere to the standards in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Are we going to be making submissions on this to Hassan, who is the special rapporteur, one of the two special rapporteurs? I think we need to prepare a strategy for this, because I see that the Permanent Forum is trying to prepare an expert paper, but I cannot forget the Permanent Forum statement at the forest meeting in Brazil, when Permanent Forum member Koki said that the real challenge is to get our share of the REDD money for indigenous peoples. Perhaps the Permanent Forum has backed itself into a conflict of interest, but we know where we are coming from. Thank you.